when you talk about hospitals, you know that some hospitals cost more than others. Okay, so if you go to one hospital, it's going to, regardless of your insurance type, some hospitals charge more than others do. So why is that? Well, there's a few reasons. So severity of a patient's illness. So when you go to the hospital, you get treated. The more severe, the more you get charged. The next one has to do with you pay for, and so you want to go to the best hospital at some specialty, you're going to have to pay the most money for it. And this goes back to how hospitals compete. And so those hospitals are the best because they pay the best doctors. And the best doctors get paid the best money. And so that gets passed down to the patients. And so as it follows through, the better the hospital, the more you have to pay. The intensity of the services, how much goes into it, the more that goes into treating you, the more people are going to get charged. Now, when we talk about the difference between cost reimbursement and charges, we've also noted that some hospitals do teaching and some do research. Those are most of the time non-revenue generating activities. And so you still need to pay those doctors, staff to work there. And so how do you get that money? A lot of times through patient charges. Differences in billing. Some may do billing different. Talk about the ways that hospitals get paid, and so that plays a part into it. Price of labor and other inputs. This is more the cost of living type of reasoning, to where it's more expensive to run some businesses in some areas versus others. So, for example, you have to pay a doctor more in New York City than you would in, let's say, a small hospital in Oregon. And the reason why is that cost of living is higher there, and so you have to pay your employees more. And at the same time, in places like New York City, to buy property, to pay taxes, you have to pay a higher amount. So you have to charge more for that. And then efficiency is the other one, where the more efficient a hospital is, the more they're able to cut costs, the less they have to charge the patients. So when it comes to hospitals, they try to control their costs, all right? Because a lot of hospitals, at least in some aspect, try to keep their costs low. Whether it's to be able to operate, whether it's to be able to charge their patients less, or just make more profits. Right? They want to try to get their costs at least down a little bit. Now, in the short run, almost all costs in hospitals actually are fixed. People are going to show up regardless. A lot of times, in a lot of hospitals, meals are prepared in advance. Transportation, ambulatory services, it's all prearranged. And so what happens is any decrease in number of patients results in an increase in the cost per patient. In the long run, however, almost all costs end up being variable. So employees can be hired or fired. You can expand or contract the hospital based on the number of patients you have. And so when we look at this, for example, so if you remember back to your other courses, you have your, in the short run, you have your capital that is fixed. So capital is, in a large aspect, the non-human aspect of production, of producing a good. So in the short run, the hospital is limited, its cost structure, by the size of the facility. What happens in the long run, however, is that, let's go back here for a second. Let's say that we're looking at a case where there are hundreds of patients. Let me find, where's my dotted line here? All right. Let's say that there are 100 patients. All right. So the hospital's options then are, well, they can either keep, on average, just 100 patients. And so let's say their options are they can either have a small size facility and have, that should be straight, an average cost per patient of about $700, or have a medium sized where the average cost is here, and it's going to be closer to 1,000. And so what they're going to do, they're obviously going to charge the smaller one because of the lower size. Let's say they were considering, let's say that on average they had 150. Well, here's for a medium plant, and a large and small both had roughly the same amount up here. Here they would choose a medium. And so what they're going to do is then at any given point, so up to about 125 patients, the small plan is going to have the lowest cost. Between 125 roughly and like 210, they're going to choose the medium size. That's where the costs are lowest. And then the large one, they would charge for any more than that. And so what this is going to look like then, because large, medium, and small, they're three broad categories. But if in reality there's a unlimited amount of short-run capital sizes, short-run plant sizes. And so what they're going to do then is be the bottom of all these points, and so the long-run average cost curve is going to look something like this. So that's one way. Now, when it comes to hospital budgets, there's a lot of uncertainty. All right? And how they deal with that can really affect how well the hospital does. So the way that organizations in general, there's things that could happen, unexpected circumstances could arise, and the hospital or any business needs to adjust. And so, for example, let's look at the planned here. Planned, if something they know is going to happen, let's just stick with hospitals, something they know is going to happen in the short run, they can do scheduling, weekly budget, part-timers. An example of something that's planned or known in the short run would be if there is a heat wave, people tend to get sick, heat stroke, and so they may put more people on, especially people that deal with that. In the long run, though, if something they know is going to happen that they're going to have to adjust for example, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, most of the provisions didn't kick in for 2 years, roughly. So this gave the time the hospital know that there's going to be more patients with insurance, more people with insurance coming in, and so there's going to be more demand for services, and so it gave them time to budget, to change their plant size. Okay. Facility conversion is another example. Some areas throughout the country, younger millennial types aren't moving to anymore. And so because of that, birth rates are going down in these areas. And so a conversion would be to close or cut back in the areas that deal with these types of services. Now, things also happen that are random, that they don't know is going to happen. In the short run, it could be something like a big accident happens, and they have a lot of people coming in. So how do they plan for this, or how do they adjust for this? Things like overtime and temps. Keep a lot of inventory, especially of essential materials to make sure that they're covered, or maintain excess capacity to make sure they have everything they need just in case. Now, in the long run, how they can provide for this is by keeping financial reserves, keeping money left over, stopping competitors from coming in through regulation, through regulatory capture, or by declaring bankruptcy as a, I say short-term, look at the long run, but as a short-term solution to try to correct for these. Now, the ways that hospitals deal with these situations depends on the type of budget. So there's really 4 budget types, and they are with fixed budget. It doesn't change with the volume, with how many people are coming in. Flexible, it does depend on volume. So the more people come in, the greater the hospital's budget is. So it sounds like more flexible. An operating budget is just one budget they have for all anticipated expenses. And then the strategic budget looks at long-term change in plans. So depending on their budget, it's going to affect how they approach each of these different areas. But in general, this is how hospitals look at costs and how they adjust with it.